Yeah, it felt a lot like the Stanford game, didn't it? It was 2 weeks ago. Um, Stanford had led 42-13 midway through the second half. Here, Oregon State led 42-17 midway through the second half. It all just felt very familiar. I think Stanford actually, did more with the passing game than Oregon State did. Oregon State just kind of mashed USC, blew USC's defensive line off the ball. Drake Jackson, he was a projected first rounder, maybe like a back end, like number 25, number 30 kind of pick before the season. Hello, he was not home. No one on USC was home on the defensive front. The defensive line was supposed to be one of the stronger position groups on the roster, along with the wide receivers, but nobody on the defensive line showed up against Oregon State, and they were just moving the pile. The Beavers were moving the pile 5, 6, 7 yards. Did an occasional wide run to kind of stretch USC's run defense horizontally, but then we're able to do plenty between the tackles and the main gaps up the middle. And it was just very easy. Like, 3rd and 1, like it was almost a lock that Oregon State was going to get 2-3 yards. Just absolutely no resistance. And so this is the second straight home game, the second game in a 3-game stretch that USC's defense was AWOL on its home field, playing with very little energy, very little passion. So it's a good reminder, Mark, that Clay Helton wasn't on the sidelines for this game, but you still saw all the imprints. And so the coaching staff left behind, Dante Williams, the interim head coach, Todd Orlando, the defensive coordinator. Getting rid of Clay Helton didn't fix things. And it just is a sign of how deep the wreckage is, how much the new coach has to sort through and fix, how much of a culture change is needed at USC.
A lowly regarded roster in regards to recruiting rankings, piling up 322 yards on the ground. And as Matt said, not a whole lot of damage in necessarily quantity through the air, 19 pass attempts, but they completed 15 for 4 touchdowns and over 200 yards. So, wow. Oregon State wins at USC. So you alluded to the coaching staff and what is left of it from the Clay Helton era, but that will not be the case going forward.
Yeah, so this is the kind of game which was very helpful in terms of providing clarity, right, Mark? I mean, these guys are auditioning for jobs, and if they wanted to stay on the staff, if they wanted to get any kind of leverage with athletic director Mike Bohn, who essentially is the guy running the program. When an AD fires the head coach in week 2, that means that the AD's in charge. The AD's making this statement that, hey, we have to change the program. So, Dante Williams is technically the head coach, but it's Mike Bohn who's really running the show, determining where the program goes from here. So these guys are auditioning for Mike Bohn and where they're going to be in 2022. So it's pretty clear. Todd Orlando, not going to be the defensive coordinator next year. Dante Williams, we talked about what his ceiling was if he wanted to stay at USC. And my view was that the ceiling was defensive coordinator. Head coach out of the question. Defensive coordinator, let's see what happens. Well, guess he's not going to be defensive coordinator after this performance against Oregon State. And, Graham Harrell, it was never realistic to expect Graham Harrell was going to be back because they're not going to have the air raid at USC. Like, the fans don't want it. It's a very sore spot with the fan base. And, of course, the air raid has made USC soft. We saw it again. The running game is just not even an option for this offense. And with Kedon Slovis there, he doesn't have the dual threat dimension of Jackson Dart, being able to make plays outside the pocket, being willing to take the ball and run with it, kind of have a linebacker mentality, a quarterback. Kedon Slovis is not that guy. He's a pocket passer, just wants to get the ball out of there, read the defense, make the right pass. He doesn't have that running capability. And we saw Oregon State, Chance Nolan, he completed the 15 of 19 passes, as you mentioned, but also he can run. He can tuck it under and run with it. He ran up the middle, ran to the side, ran from many different angles. And that's a dimension that USC not only couldn't stop on defense, but it didn't have it on offense. And so, one of the things about USC football, we remember student body right, John McKay, John Robinson, the traditional way. Pete Carroll ran a very traditional offense. I mean, he had good coordinators, Norm Chow in 2004 when they won the national title, and of course had Lane Kiffin and Steve Sarkisian after that. But the offense always remains structurally fairly traditional. This was pro style, not a lot of the modernized spread concepts that you've seen in the past decade or so. USC still ran a traditional style. So people at USC are inclined to think, hey, we got to go back to a traditional offense. And again, you're not going to see the air raid. But the bigger point, it's less about playing style, Mark. It's more about having a quarterback who can make different kinds of plays. And Kedon Slovis is limited to being a pocket passer. Jackson Dart, had he been able to play, he would have played against Oregon State. And you can see how different the USC offense is without Jackson Dart. When he was able to make plays outside the pocket, he was able to make plays as a runner. That gives the defense so much more to think about than what Kedon Slovis brings to the table. And then you add the fact that there's no running game. See, Jackson Dart was his own running game when he was able to play against Washington State the week before. But with Kedon Slovis there is no threat of a running quarterback that makes USC's offense that much more limited. That explains the difference between a potent attack that you saw against Washington State and the much more limited, much more pedestrian attack you saw against Oregon State.
Yeah, it's just a less of a margin for error when you've got a pocket passer. He better be on his game. He better be one of the very best in the nation, because he's basically either incapable or unwilling to run the ball, versus a quarterback that threatens the defense. They've got to worry about their rush lanes. They've got to worry about him breaking contain, picking up first downs on third down. So it's a completely different mindset from the defense and what they have to guard against, and so many more options for the offense. So, Matt, we talked last week after the big 45-point explosion against Washington State that sometimes in these type situations with an interim head coach, sometimes it galvanizes the troops and they play above their heads or play to their talent level and they have a good season. We've seen that at USC a few times. Or the train derails. And this, you're talking about the two worst teams along with Arizona in the conference. And so USC was able to pull it together for a half against Washington State, but here against Oregon State, they weren't. And that has to be very concerning.
Yeah. I mean, the teeth of the schedule is still coming up, Mark. Utah, Arizona State, Notre Dame, UCLA, and BYU. BYU looks really good. So, the way USC is playing, we're looking at like a 5-7 season. 6-6 might be the ceiling for this team. You're going to beat Colorado this Saturday. You would think, you would hope. Going to beat Arizona. Other than that, how many likely wins are out there? And here's another thing: that San Jose State team that USC drilled in Week 1, San Jose State scored 3 points in a 20-point loss to Western Michigan. So that kind of retrospectively puts that game in a better light. The San Jose State, we thought they were going to be good, but they're not. And so the USC's wins are over a San Jose State team that looks terrible and over Washington State.
Yeah, there's no doubt that they had the schedule in mind when they pulled the plug on Clay Helton, because they didn't want mediocrity to look better than it actually was against 3 soft opponents, but also to set up the new regime to at least give them a chance to do something here in 2021, give them a great place to get rolling with 3 games here against the worst part of the schedule, and then to move on from there. But they haven't even been able to take advantage of that. They should win at Colorado, but it's a road game and they couldn't win at home against Oregon State. So this Colorado team has looked awful the last couple of weeks after a pretty spirited effort against Texas A&M earlier in September.
Yeah, and I mean, I don't. It's not a lock, and USC is a touchdown favorite, and that USC. If USC is USC should be favored by like 21, 24 points, but only 7. And that itself tells you that it's not an actual lock in Boulder.
Matt Zemek, Trojans Wire. We always appreciate him stopping by to break down USC football for us. Matt, thank you so much. Enjoy the rest of your week and the weekend of college football.
Thanks so much, Mark. Always appreciate it.